What we need is light.
For you can't drive out the darkness with a stick, with a stick. No, you can't drive out the devil with a stick. Some proclaim all men are sinners, can't escape the devil's might. How their interest must intrigue him, they won't let him out of sight.
What we need is light.
For you can't drive out the darkness, talking sin, no, you can't drive out the devil talking sin. Some of us were taught the slogan, social evils must be slain. But can anger drive out sorrow? How can passion conquer pain?
What we need is light.
For you can't drive out the darkness while we hate, no, you can't drive out the darkness while we hate. Brother, have you ever wondered why the darkness lingers on? If you want to see the sunrise, let us turn and face the dawn.
What we need is light.
For we'll only best the darkness when we love, yes, we only best the devil when we love.
Good morning. I'd like to welcome you all to the Sunday service on this warm Sunday. It's lucky we're inside today, isn't it? My name is Bharat, and this is my wife, Anandi. And I'd especially like to invite all our guests and also the graduates of the Meditation Teachers Training Program. And may you share the joys of interiorization with many, many people. I'd like to read from Ways of the One Light by Swami Kriyananda, and this week's reading is The Redeeming Light. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The book of Isaiah in the Bible, chapter 9, tells us, "The people that walked in darkness have seen a great light. They that dwell in the land of the shadow of death, upon them hath the light shined." What is this light of which so many scriptures speak? In Autobiography of a Yogi by Paramahansa Yogananda, we read of an early experience the Master had with that light. "I was blessed about the age of 8 with a wonderful healing through the photograph of Lahiri Mahashai. This experience gave intensification to my divine love. While at our family estate in Ikapur, Bengal, I was stricken with Asiatic cholera. My life was despaired of. The doctors could do nothing. At my bedside, Mother frantically motioned to me to look at Lahiri's picture on the wall above my head. Bow to him mentally. She knew I was too feeble even to lift my hands in salutation. If you really show your devotion and inwardly kneel before him, your life will be spared." I gazed at the photograph and saw there a blinding light enveloping my body and the entire room. My nausea and other uncontrollable symptoms disappeared. I was well. At once I felt strong enough to bend over and touch Mother's feet in appreciation of her immeasurable faith in her Guru. Mother pressed her head repeatedly against the little picture. "O omnipresent Master, I thank thee that thy light has healed my son." I realized that she too had witnessed the luminous blaze through which I had instantly recovered from a usually fatal disease. Where my light is, God once told a saint, whom the divine light had healed, no darkness dwell. The divine light, pure, calm, liberating, is the only final cure for every kind of delusion, ill health, emotional grief, and spiritual ignorance. Seek it daily in the silence, in the deep meditation. As the Bhagavad Gita says in the 5th chapter, for whom that darkness of the soul is chased by light, splendid and clear shines, manifests the truth, as if the sun of wisdom sprang to shed its beams of light. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om. Om. Om.
Good morning. I'd like to begin with reading from Whispers from Eternity, a book of beautiful poems and prayers by Paramahansa Yogananda. This is a short reading, but very much to the point. Demand that God's light drive dark ignorance away. O divine friend, though the darkness of my ignorance be as old as the world, still make me realize that with the dawn of thy light, the darkness will vanish as though it had never been. I wanted to talk a little bit about the beautiful reading that Bharat just did, because there were two stories that bear looking at again. The first is the image of Yogananda, our guru master, we call him, lying in bed as a child with fatal disease of cholera, which is, so the small child is completely dehydrated, he can hardly move, he's on the brink of death. And then that light comes, and the light is not fazed by dehydration or fatal illness. Immediately, he's healed completely. Then the second story that's only referred to in this reading, I'd like to share because it's really a very, very beautiful story. It's a story of a man who had diabetes, and it was very, very far advanced, and the doctors gave him 3 months to live. And so this man, he was an Indian man, said, if I have only 3 months to live, I want to spend that seeking God. And so he began to meditate with great effort because of his advanced illness. But day by day, he trained himself to just sit a little bit longer and a little bit longer in meditation at each period of meditation. And after 3 months, he was still alive. And after a year, he was still alive. And by now, he was meditating 18 hours a day. This is a true story. And when he, at 3 years, had been meditating these long periods of meditation, he had an experience of being filled with the great light of God. I'm sorry, there's one thing I need to add to this story. This man, when he meditated, his prayer was, Lord, come into this broken temple. And so his meditation, he didn't ask for anything else, just that God come to him. And when at the end of 3 years he was filled with this great light of God, his body was completely healed. And he was amazed, and he said, God, I didn't ask you for healing. I only asked that you would come to me. And the Lord answered him and said, where my light is, no darkness can dwell. This light is God, and that light is what created everything. It created all of us. Whatever we're facing in the way of illness, negativity, problems, obstacles, that light is stronger than any of those things. And so the assignment for us is to tune into that light. Now, does that mean we have to see the spiritual eye in meditation, the perfect golden ring and the blue center and the star in the center of that? No, it's not necessarily that. But just to try to attune our minds to the presence of God here, which we may experience as light, which we may visualize as light, which we may sense as light, to try to lift ourselves up, lift our minds up to that very positive, powerful presence of God that's within us, that is stronger than anything else. And that light changes our experience of life. There was a guest here at the Expanding Light a week ago who is a professional photographer, and he took courses from the famous nature photographer Galen Rowell. And Galen Rowell said in one of his classes, he said, color does not truly exist in nature. What we see when we look at nature is we see the object's response to light. And then this photographer, because his whole photography is kind of based on that statement, he showed me a photograph he'd taken of the Anasazi Indian ruins in Arizona. And there were 4 walls in a row. Each wall had a doorway in the center of it. So there were like 4 doorways in a row, each in a wall. All the walls were made of the same substance, some earthly substance. And looking at that photograph, the first wall was a sort of a greenish gray. The second wall was a sort of an orangey color. The next wall was dark brown, and the last wall was golden. They were all the same wall, but they were all picking up different angles of light. And so it is in our lives. It's how much light we can bring to anything that's going to color what that experience is like for us. And I'm sure we've all had experiences either in our lives or watching the lives of other people where what happened was, by any standards, a horrible thing, and yet, because of the light that the person was able to bring to the situation, it turned into be not a horrible thing at all, but actually a huge and great blessing to them and perhaps to other people as well. So this is the assignment that we have from the reading and from our gurus, is to tune into that light. And I was thinking, well, what is it that, why don't we tune into that light? That's who we are. That's our nature. That's should be the easiest thing in the world. And I remembered an experience that Bharat and I had, it was quite a while, maybe 8 years ago or something like that, and it took place up at the parking lot above, near the Center for Radiant Health. We were driving down that road, and we saw this site at the side of the road, and we pulled over to sit and watch it because it was kind of intriguing. And to explain it, let me give you a little bit of natural history lesson. There's a bird called the cowbird that is called a parasitic animal because it doesn't build nests of its own. It lays its eggs in the nests of other birds. And then the baby cowbird has the instinct. It has the shortest gestation period, so it's hatched first, and it's the biggest one. And it has the instinct to crowd the other little birds out of the nest, so that the mother bird is sort of constrained to raising only this cowbird. And so what we saw at the side of the road were 2 birds. One was a little bird, maybe the size of a wren or something like that. We actually don't remember the size of it. That was the whole scene that was so dramatic. It was a very small bird, and then there was another bird on the ground that was at least twice as big as this other little bird. It was like an adolescent cowbird. So it was still somewhat of a baby. And so this cowbird was there kind of with his mouth open, making sort of squeaking noises like, feed me, feed me. And this poor little brown bird was running around. And it's funny because, birds are very energetic and so forth, but you never see a stressed out bird. But this bird was as close to looking stressed out as I've ever seen a bird look. He looked to she looked sort of frantic and exhausted, and she didn't even care that we were about 4 feet away from her. Her whole focus is, how am I going to get enough food to keep this huge animal going? And she was just running all over trying to fine things to put in its mouth. And so we sat there for quite a while watching the scene, but recently I was thinking of that image, and I was thinking that's actually a very poignant image, because we are like that little brown bird. We are children of light, and we find an alien offspring in our nest. And that alien offspring is material desire. It's our involvement with the material world around us. Light is transcendent. It's what do you call it? You can't touch it. It's intangible. It's intangible. And the material world seems so real. And we get going around certain ideas. Maybe we think we need to buy something like a larger house so we can have more peace in our family, more quiet, more privacy. And then suddenly that material object takes on a life of its own, and it needs to be paid for, it needs to be furnished, we're sort of keeping this alien species going, and it's distracting us. We're forgetting what we really are, and we're thinking only of this material thing. Or we might find it in terms of other people. Maybe we have to fulfill the expectations that other people have of us. We have to live so that they will feel good about us. And we're sort of, it's not us, and it's so real, and yet it's not coming from our light. I was thinking of a saying that expresses this well. It said, when I was 20 years old, I was really concerned about what other people thought about me. When I became 40 years old, I decided I really didn't care what other people thought about me. And when I got to be 60 years old, I realized that no one was ever thinking about me anyway. So our duty is to say, it's not that we can't buy houses, and it's not that we can't have friends, and it's not that we can't live in the material world, but not to be at the point where it's crowding out the light. I love what Swami says, and I think about it often and with some wonderment, basically. He said, I never allow anything to make me lose my inner peace. I think about that very often. To keep our connection with light, that's our priority. And to say, no matter what it looks like outwardly, no matter how dire these circumstances, it's all about light. There's another obstacle to attunement to that light. And it's equally pervasive, and it's equally challenging to notice even, and that is negativity. In the same way that we can just shift our focus to the material world and think that that is where it all is, we can get ourselves locked in negative thinking, and it distracts us from attuning to light. I had a very striking experience with this in 2006, and it was just a demonstration to me about how subtle negativity is and how easy it is, and how much, speaking for myself, how much I need to really pay attention to it. In 2006, I had worked on a project editing something, and I thought it was finished, and I sent it to Swami Kriyananda, and he said, this isn't good enough. I need to work on it. And so he re-edited it, and he was in India at the time, and fortunately someone was able to bring me back. He edits by hand, and so they brought me back his document, and I entered his corrections into the thing I was working on. And it was thrilling, really. I mean, just to see how much brighter and how much more alive it could be. It was a very inspiring experience. 95% was an inspiring experience. And 5% of those mistakes, most of those errors I never could have caught. I never could have done that level of editing. But 5% of them were errors that I should have caught. A missing word, a comma in the wrong place, things that were just very, very obvious, and they shouldn't have been left in a finished document. And so I was feeling, okay, this is great, but I do feel kind of bad about those parts that I should have caught. And so we were in India shortly after that. And now let me just say about Swami Kriyananda. To me, I don't see light, but when I see Swami, and more over the years, he seems to be surrounded by just a totally impenetrable aura of positivity and light, and nothing shakes it. Whatever anybody says to him, whatever dire illness he faces, whatever challenging situations are going outwardly, it doesn't change. The response is always positive, it's always kindly. When he looks at people, he isn't thrown by somebody that, he's not judging people. It's just kindness and light. And so we were in India, and there were a group of people in a room, and Swami came in, and he came over to me, and he seemed to be more sort of filled with light than ever before. And he came over to me and he said, you would not have been able to make the corrections that I made, which of course I knew. In my response, I probably could say it to most people in the room, and it would seem like a kind of a self-honest response. I said, well, there were a lot of things I should have caught. And what was very interesting was what happened, because Swami didn't exchange his expression at all. But it was like that energy that I put out bounced off the light and bounced back to me, and I thought, oh, that was a negative response. That was saying, I did wrong. He was giving me good energy, saying, you did the best you could, and I was saying, I did bad, I did wrong, and I was rejecting that light. It's what's interesting about that example is how subtle it was and how real it is, and how awake we have to be to catch our identification with limitation instead of potential, instead of positivity, instead of light. Swami Kriyananda is cloud-free. Nothing that he does has a shadow on it. It's just, he's giving it everything he's got. He's absolutely sure it's going to be a success. He's absolutely sure whatever he does has the blessing of God, because he's dedicated to God. And that is what we are to do. We might go, oh yeah, but I'm not like that. Well, as Yogananda said to someone, what do you think made me a master? It was by doing. And so to try more and more to just let it go, let the littleness go, and embrace the positivity, embrace that light, which is who we truly are. Well, how also do we do that? We pull out of our life materialism and negativity, and how do we embrace light? How do we move in that direction more and more? Without meditation, we're going to have a hard time doing it, because negativity and materialism are so convincing. They're so real. But we need that period of time where we can touch that intangible light within us, or that intangible peace or joy, or however we express it. If we can have just a moment of that. I had a beautiful experience with this just a couple of weeks ago. A woman came for our First Timers Week, and she was dealing with some very big challenges in her life, and you could see it. Her whole face was clouded and tense. And so we had our first couple of classes on meditation and philosophy and so on, and then on Wednesday we went to the river, and we got back late, so she went to the Lahiri Shrine and meditated by herself. And that night we had a video. Actually, it was Dr. Peter's talk on the brain, and so I didn't actually see her till after the video when we were having a little discussion. And I looked at her face, and her eyes were filled with light. Her forehead was filled with light. And since we were talking about meditation, she said, I just have to tell you that I went down to the Lahiri Shrine by myself, and she said, up to this point, I felt I'd been doing a breathing exercise. But I felt there this incredible something from inside myself that I knew was real. And then she was asking about it, but I had a hard time holding on to it and all the usual things that people have, but she felt it, and it transformed her. She connected with light, and I'm going to be very interested to see what effect that has on what happens when she goes back. But we need that on a regular basis to say, this is who I am. There's a book by a spiritual teacher called This is Reality. And I love that. I haven't ever read the book, but I love the title. I love the title. This is reality. This is what we need to connect with daily. And when we touch it, to say, this is what is real. Yes, there's a lot of things going on outside that are not real, but this is what is real. So to feel it and then to live in it. We want to, Yogananda always tells people to introspect, like it tells in the Gita. But sometimes devotees get caught in introspecting about all their failings. And I have this subtle, we get deeper and deeper into the subtle aspects of our faults. And another part of introspecting is to say, who am I really? Is that little fault that I've had for however many decades it's been, is that who I really am? I'm really light. This is how I want to be. This is how I want to live. There was a beautiful story in the autobiography of a yogi. I just opened to it this morning and I feel I should share it. Yogananda said he was meditating on his bed. He was sitting cross-legged on the bed, and you kind of sink into the bed. And he gazed at the ceiling, and there seemed to be these sort of moving lights up there, and he couldn't quite figure it out. And then he started to see them as beams of light. And then he experienced his body as light, and his body lifted off the bed because it had no physical substance to it. And he said, what's happening, God? And God said, I'm giving you the experience to know that you are not a solid form, that you are like a movie. You're just a beam of light. And he sat there enjoying that light, and he was so absorbed in the inner joy that he said, oh, please, God, just absorb me into your light, just as you took Elijah up into heaven in a flame, take me into your light. And he said that must have been disconcerting for God, because suddenly the vision was over and he felt his body sink back into the bed. But it's a beautiful, beautiful reminder that we want to stay connected to that light, and it's that light that is redeeming us. So I wanted to end now with an affirmation of Yogananda's that can be used for physical healing, mental healing, healing of stress, whatever it is. And close your eyes now. And just repeat it. We'll just do it 3 times. I am made of eternal light.
I am made of eternal light.
It permeates every particle of my being.
It permeates every particle of my being.
I am living in that light.
I am living in that light.
The divine spirit fills me within and without.
The divine spirit fills me within and without.
And now in a whisper, I am made of eternal light. It permeates every particle of my being. I am living in that light. The divine spirit fills me within and without. Now focus your mind at the point between the eyebrows and do it silently. I am made of eternal light. It permeates every particle of my being. I am living in that light. The divine spirit fills me within and without. Om. Peace.
Your heart.